So yes, this is the Final Fantasy trading card game where you and another person are going to get together and play a card game with characters from all across the Final Fantasy series. If a game has Final Fantasy in its name, it's probably in this card game. I think 4 Heroes of Light doesn't have any cards. That's the one I can think of. I think that's the only game I can think of that actually doesn't have any cards. There's even a Mystic Quest card. Just one, though. There's one Benjamin. Because he was in Theat Rhythm. Alright, so what you're going to need to play is you're going to need 2 people. It is a 2-player game. Each player needs a 50-card deck. It is exactly 50 cards for this game. And then there's also an extra deck mechanic they introduced recently. This is your limit break deck. We'll get more into that later, and that's going to be up to 8 cards. So then, let's look at... No.
I love technology. I love technology at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I probably should have just plugged this into my laptop. I have a mouse. Okay, so this is what a Final Fantasy TCG card looks like. This is a nice cloud here. So if we're going to look up here, we've got the name of the card is here on this line. And right next to that, we have the card's cost and its element. There are 6 main elements in the Final Fantasy TCG. You've got fire, ice, wind, earth, lightning, and water. We'll get a little more into those later.
And then there's also 2 bonus elements, light and dark.
But they behave kind of strangely, so we'll talk about that. Down here, we've got a card's category. This is the Final Fantasy game it's from. Cloud, obviously, is a Category 7 card, and this card is also a Dissidia card. There's also card type, so there's going to be 4 different card types. That's coming up in a couple slides. We've got forwards, backups, monsters, and summons. And in the middle here, you've got card's job. I should have put this slide after the card type slide. It would have made some of these easier to explain. For you Magic players, a card's job is basically its creature type. But basically, it's just it's a category a card can fall into, and different cards will care about that. So, you know, a card might care about how many job soldiers you control, or if you control a job soldier, or it'll give a bonus to your job soldiers. All forwards have a power, which is the number they use for combat. You can ignore these 3 zeros to the right here and basically just pay attention to this first digit. But it's a Japanese card game. They like their thousands. Here's in this main text box here is what the card does. Most cards are fairly self-explanatory. I'll get into some of the exceptions to that later. And very important down here is a card's serial number. So your deck can contain no more than 3 copies of a single card, and that is determined by the serial number. So you could have a deck of 50 clouds. It wouldn't be a good deck, but you could only have 3 of each cloud in there. This is the playing field. It's fairly bare bones. There's not a lot of different areas to keep track of. You've got your deck. Your break zone is your discard pile. It's where cards go after they've been used or after they've been destroyed. And then your damage zone. I don't know if anybody is familiar with certain other games like...
One Piece, I think? Or does One Piece do the backwards of this? Weiss Schwarz does this.
Yeah, Weiss Schwarz does this. Vanguard does this. But damage is basically going to be done by having your opponent... You're going to be putting cards from your deck into another zone, and once enough cards are there, you lose the game. Okay, so like I was saying, there's 4 different card types. You've got forwards. These are your attackers. They're going to be making attempts on your opponent to try to deal them damage and win you the game. Backups are going to help you play cards. They produce CP, which is crystal points, and they have other beneficial effects. Backups enter the field dull, which is it's going to be sideways, and you can only control 5 backups at a time. Monsters just sort of stick around on the field. They'll have various different effects. Some will become forwards. Some will just have little abilities you can use or things they do when you play them. And summons are quick one-time effects that then immediately go to your break zone after you use them. it is. Okay, so how you play cards in this game. In order to play cards, you need to generate crystal points, or CP. At least one CP that you generate has to be of the same element, and the rest can be whatever element you want. So to play this cloud, you need 4 CP, and at least one of them has to be Earth. You have 2 different methods of generating CP. You can either dull a backup, or you turn it sideways. For your Magic players, it's tapping. Or you can also discard any card in your hand to add 2 CP of that card's element. So you don't have a lot of other card games will have problems with resources. Sometimes you just don't draw them. This game, you should always be able to play cards.
It's not like Magic or Pokemon where you sometimes just don't draw lands or you don't draw energy. You're always playing in this one.
So here are our 6 elements. I've got a quick little breakdown of each of them up here. They each have their different strengths and weaknesses. Fire's all about getting rid of forwards and dealing damage. Ice tries to constrict your opponent, let them do less things per turn. Whereas wind is all about doing all the things you possibly can in a turn. Earth is flexible, it's durable, a lot of its forwards have very high power, and it's also very good at letting you produce CP of elements you probably shouldn't be able to. Lightning kills things. It kills them dead. Water is sort of a control color. It's all about putting your opponent's cards back in their hand and giving you more cards to try to build yourself an advantage over time. So then there's also some cards are more than one element. So in order to play these, you follow basically the same rules as playing normal cards, but you have to pay at least 1 CP of each element that it is. But on the plus side, you can discard them for either of their elements of CP to play your other cards. So you could discard this lightning for either ice or lightning CP to play an ice or a lightning card.
You would get 2 ice or
2 ice or 2 lightning, yes. No, you cannot
Correct.
get one of each. It's only one at a time. But then there's also these special light and dark cards. Now, the thing about light and dark is you can only control one light or dark character at a time. You also can't discard light and dark cards to generate CP. But you can play them with CP of any element, and they tend to be very strong to make up for their drawbacks. Just don't try to put too many in a deck, or else you're just going to end up with a hand that can't do anything. Nope.
See if the arrow keys let you.
They do. Okay. So I did forget to put a first turn slide in here. So when you start the game, both players are going to draw a hand of 5 cards. If you don't like your 5 cards, you can put those 5 cards back on the bottom of your deck and draw a new 5 cards, and that will be your opening hand instead.
You can only do that once. There's only one mulligan in this game.
You only get to do it once. Also, it should go without saying you have to shuffle your deck first. You can't just not shuffle your deck. So then from there, your basic turn goes as follows. First, you activate any dull characters you control. You turn them from being sideways to being upright. Then you draw cards. The first player will draw 1 card. Every turn after that, you draw 2 cards a turn. This is because of the discard ability. You need more cards to play cards, basically. Then you move to your main phase. That's where you're going to play your characters and cast your summons and do abilities, basically where you're going to do the meat of your playing the game. Then you're going to move to the attack phase. That's where you're going to use your forwards to attack your opponent to try to deal them damage. And then you get another main phase to do all the things you did in the first main phase again, if you didn't. And then the turn ends, and you pass to the next player, and then they go through all these steps over and over until the game ends. For the two of you who haven't played a lot of TCGs, feel free to see me after this for greater explanations for some of this stuff if I'm going a little fast. Backups enter tapped.
But forwards
But everything else enters untapped. Yes. Yes. Well, I'm about to get to combat in a second here. So attacking and blocking. So in order to attack, first you're going to pick one of your forwards that you have controlled since the beginning of the turn, or if it has haste, and that has not yet attacked this turn. Each forward can only attack once per turn. Then you're going to say that it's attacking, and you're going to dull it. You're going to turn it sideways. Then your opponent has the option to take one of their active forwards, active meaning it's right side up, it hasn't been dulled, and they can block your attacker. So then, if the attack is not blocked, your opponent will take the top card of their deck, and they will put it into their damage zone. And then, if they have 7 cards in their damage zone, they lose. So the first person to take 7 damage loses the game. However, if they are blocked, then each forward is going to deal an amount of damage to the other forward equal to its power. And then if a forward has taken more damage than its power, it is put into the break zone. It is considered to have been broken. At the end of each turn, damage will go away.
But it is cumulative for that turn because, as I think
I always forget there are games where damage sticks around, and I'm so used to games where that doesn't happen that I don't think to.
But it is relevant for blocking for a couple things that I think we're probably about to get to. But I'm just going to kind of jump a little bit on this. You are attacking one creature at a time.
Forward.
Forward. Sorry.
Forgive me, chronic Magic
I have
player,
played Magic
brother.
since about 1999. Yes. So combat in this. In some games, when you have a combat phase, you attack with everything all at once. In this one, that's not the case. You are attacking with one forward, and then you can choose to attack with another one, and then you can choose to attack with another one. Each of those is happening individually. Once you've moved to your main phase, you can't attack with any more of them, but it is one at a time.
It's also one at a time for blockers. You can only use one forward to block a forward.
So no magic stuff, we can have multiple creatures.
Nope.
blocking one guy.
Correct.
Nope. However, for all you old Magic fans, who knows about banding?
Okay, I love that reaction. This is going to make banding make so much sense to you, so please go home and put all your old terrible banding cards into a commander deck so you can flex on your friends.
So there is an exception to the attack with one forward at a time rule. You can attack, if you have 2 forwards of the same element, you can have them attack together basically as one forward in what's called a party. It'll still only deal 1 damage to your opponent, but if it's blocked, it will deal the combined damage, the combined power of the party to the blocking forward as damage. And also, if the party is blocked, the blocking forward will deal damage divided as its controller chooses in units of 1,000 to the attacking forwards. Everything's in units of 1,000 in this, like I said earlier.
Yeah, they haven't done anything like Yu-Gi-Oh! Where it's like 12,000 and 50.
With that, real quick, if you use a party, only one of the cards goes into the damage deck, or do you use the both? So
It depends on how much damage it takes.
and I deal damage.
Okay, if a party deals damage to a player, they still just take 1 damage.
Right. So do both cards then go into you move one of the cards into your damage zone, right?
No.
Okay, so what you move into the damage zone, when you take damage, the top card of your deck goes into the damage zone.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
The damage goes away between turns.
Only the damage,
on
the
forwards.
The damage to a person sticks around till the end of the game.
Yeah, we're going to play a sample game after this to hopefully clear up what I lack the articulation to slow down and explain properly with a PowerPoint. When you put a card into damage, there's a chance that it will have an EX burst. So if a card has an EX burst and it is put from your deck into your damage zone, you will immediately put its effect into play. So like in the case of this Riku, you will put a forward back in its owner's hand. Or the Chocobo, you will look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put a character in your hand. By the way, characters are forwards, backups, and monsters. I think I forgot to say that earlier. The only thing that's not a character is a summon. And if it's a summon, you basically just do the whole effect, and if it's an ability on a character, you replace whatever the original trigger condition. So like this Riku is normally when it attacks, you do this ability, but if it goes to damage, you just do that ability as if it had just attacked. A lot of them are when this forward enters, or et cetera, et cetera. things I couldn't fit in naturally. But still definitely need to get talked about because they are important. Names. So, interesting thing here is that you can only control one card with the same name at a time. So you can only, even if you got multiple Sephiroths in your deck, you can only have one Sephiroth on the field at a time. That's a forward Sephiroth, a backup Sephiroth. Question.
Is that across players or?
Nope, that is just per player.
Okay. So I can have a Sephiroth and my opponent.
Yes.
Correct.
But you can't have two Sephiroths. The exception is if cards have that little 3-card stacked up symbol in the top right corner, then you can have as many with that card name as you want. That's basically how this game represents any game with a job system to represent your generic units. And you could have as many Dragoons as you want, as long as they're just Dragoon. There's also Crystal. Crystal is not to be confused with Crystal Points. It's got a little symbol here, and it's just another way to pay for certain abilities. Different cards will generate it, and then you can spend it on different things.
Yes, so the resource system in this is also called Crystal Points, but then they introduced this mechanic that generates crystal.
Now, to be fair, that's never confusing on a card, because cards only ever call it CP, and they only ever refer to crystal with the little symbol.
Shame we can't talk in pictures.
Right?
Okay, so, the stack. For any Magic players, the stack works the same as it does in Magic. That's just cut and dry. It sounds a lot more confusing than it is. I put this blurb up here that's just straight from the starter guide. Basically, anytime an effect would go anytime an effect would happen, first it goes to a bit of an imaginary waiting room that we call the stack. And then before it can resolve, both players are given the opportunity to add a new effect onto the stack. And then if neither player does, you resolve the top effect of the stack and you move on. I've got a little bit of an example here. So one player activates their ability of this Palom to try to deal 10,000 damage to Man in Black, but their opponent casts this Cockatrice summon that says that Man in Black does not receive any damage this turn. So Cockatrice resolves first, having been the last thing played to enter the stack. And so Man in Black will gain that ability, and then when Palom tries to deal damage to him, he won't take any damage because he's already been given the protection.
As the stack is resolving, are you able to,
Yes.
to put more stuff
Yes,
on?
this is Magic Stack, not Yu-Gi-Oh! Chains.
Okay.
Every time a layer of the stack goes away, each player once again gains priority and is able to add a new effect to the stack. I have, after this panel is done, I'm going to be hanging out in tabletop free play. I've got 28 learner decks for everybody to get their hands on and try playing. If there's still questions then, as I'm sure there will be, I will be there to help answer them.
Okay, time out. Go back 2 slides real quick, because a lot of people in this room have played Magic, so I want to highlight something that you glossed over. In the parentheses at the bottom, playing characters does not use the stack, Magic people. You cannot respond to the character, you can respond to its ability. So playing forwards, playing backups, playing monsters, that does not use the stack at all. The abilities all do.
Yeah, the stack in this game is exclusively for effects. It's not for playing cards. Unless they're summons, but summons are only effects, so... okay, so there's, in broad terms, there's 3 kinds of abilities. Technically there's 4, but I'll get to that in a second. You've got auto abilities that happen at specific times. They're denoted by a win or a whenever. For example, this Joshua is when he enters the field, you put a job icon or job dominant in your break zone onto the bottom of your deck. There's also action abilities, which are denoted by a cost:effect format. Basically, you pay whatever the initial cost is. In the terms of the Cerulean Drake, you're going to pay an ice CP, 1 CP of any element, and you're going to dull it, and then also put him into the break zone, and then you choose a dull forward and break it, which means to put it into the break zone. And then there's also field abilities, which are just always active. Sometimes they'll have a condition, but they're just always in effect. This Sarah as long as she's around on the field, all the forwards your opponent control lose 2,000 power. And if you control, I want to say 3 Category 13 forwards, they lose 5,000 power instead.
In that case, if your forward hits 0 power, is it done?
Yes.
Okay. So you can't have a 0 power forward.
Correct.
sitting on the field.
Correct. You cannot have a 0 power forward. I want to say I was going to get to that, but I would have needed a way to bring it up.
Or the Magic players triggered, activated, static.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, they gave him fun little names, but it's again, if you've played Magic, you basically know how to play this game already.
M-
Are there speeds to the stack?
There doesn't need to be in this case because things are already at instant speed. Summons,
No, okay, no, let me. You can only. I get what you're asking. Summons and abilities are both what you would call instant speed. Characters can only be played on your turn during your main phase while the stack is empty. Yeah, except back attack. Thank you.
But we'll get to that. We
Look,
got a big list
I
of
have,
abilities in
I have a
second
whole
here.
list of keywords to go over.
Rules first, then exceptions.
So then there's also special abilities. Special abilities are basically action abilities with one key difference. Part of their cost is this little S symbol. Now what this S symbol means is you're going to discard a card with the same name as part of the cost for this ability. They also, by the rules, are not action abilities, so if you have anything that interacts with action abilities, they don't count for this. That's not a common problem, I just thought I'd say it. So yeah, this is why you'd want to have more than 3 of a card name in your deck, is because if something has a really good special ability, then you have lots of fodder to discard it for it to activate the ability whenever you need to. Okay, couple of more specific things. There's warp. This is another thing that looks a lot more complicated than it is. Okay, so warp cards have this little thing here that says warp and then a number and then some manner of CP cost. So for Ramza here, he has warp 2 for fire and 1 generic CP. What this means is that during your main phase, you may pay fire and 1 generic CP, and then you will remove him in your hand from the game, and you're going to put 2 warp counters on him. Then at the beginning of each of your first main phases, you're going to remove a warp counter, and then when the last is removed, you're going to play him onto the field, directly removed from game. For you Magic players, this is basically suspend, except it doesn't gain haste when it enters. It also does not count as casting. Again, it's not actually complicated. It just I have to use a lot of words to explain it.
It's complicated in what you have to say to do it, but when you actually play it, it's very intuitive.
New from the question.
The work thing, that's optional, so you can either just play it normally.
Yes, you can also just play. You could also just pay 7, including a fire, and play him onto the field normally. New from our newest set to because they introduced Final Fantasy 16 cards. We have priming. So whenever you could play a character, you can pay the listed priming cost for a character. Clive down here is, I think, fire and 1. I had to make him a little small because I had to put 2 cards on here. But he has priming, Ifrit, parentheses 16, fire 1. And so anytime you can play a character, you can pay that cost. And then you search your deck for the named card that it lists, in this case, Ifrit 16. And you're going to play that from your deck on top of the character that primed. And now while they're on the field, it is treated as just the top card, but it also has the name of the bottom card, which is most relevant for Ifrit and a couple of the other ones that have special abilities. But it also means you can't play another Clive while that primed Ifrit is on the field. And then I forgot to put, if at any time a primed forward leaves the battlefield, it is removed from the game.
So, for special abilities, specifically with that Ifrit, that would mean that you could discard an Ifrit or a Clive?
Yes.
Yes.
You could, well, an Ifrit parentheses 16. That's why the parentheses are in certain card names. Yeah.
Yeah, because those parentheses do matter in the name. It's Ifrit 16 and Ifrit are 2 different card names.
Otherwise, this card would be a little too good.
If the Ifrit would take too much damage, do you put both of them?
Yes, both of them will go to the break zone, and then you'll remove the Ifrit from the game, because that's how priming works.
Good question, because I actually did not know that part either until today.
We were testing some of the learner decks earlier. Okay, so limit break. I talked at the beginning of this presentation, if you still remember that, about there you have a separate up to 8 card deck. That is your limit break deck. It can only be filled with cards that have that little limit break symbol up at the top right corner. So limit break cards are played basically like any other card, except you always have access to them. Okay. You start the game with your limit break deck face down. And then at any time you could play the cards in it, you can play them as long as they are face down. And as an additional cost to play them, each limit break card has limit break and then a number. And so when you play them, you have to turn that many face down cards in your limit break deck face up. So in this instance, to play this Zac, I would pay 3 CP, at least 1 fire, and then turn 1 other card in my limit break deck face up, and then I would play Zac to the field. And then at any time, if the limit break card would leave the field, it goes back to your limit break deck face up.
Yes.
So with limit break, it's not a randomized thing.
No,
Correct. It's kind of like having a second hand.
Okay,
it is hidden information, though. Your opponent can't know.
okay.
Like, can you look at it?
Yeah,
Yes.
you can look at it anytime you want.
You can look at it at any time. The card that you flip face up for the limit break cost is chosen.
Yes.
Yes,
Correct.
you get to choose that, because also then you don't get to play whatever cards you've turned face up.
Well, that's why I was wondering if it was a random thing.
No, it's face down because it's hidden information, and also to denote cards I can play, cards I can't play.
Okay, got it.
Is there ways to eventually put them back upside down?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I really hope they don't.
Are you allowed to have cards with the same names?
It follows the same restrictions as normal deck building. You get up to 3 of the same serial number.
And just in case there's a second question hiding under that one, Zac is still just Zac. Limit break is a denotion that he's in the limit break deck, but that's not part of his name. So you can't have this Zac and a different Zac in play.
Okay, bunch of words. So I've been using a lot of these words already. So you've got dull. That's this game's version of tapping. Basically, it means to... If a card is dull, it means it has been turned sideways. This signifies that it has been used somehow. Either a forward has attacked, or a backup has been dulled for CP, or a character has used an ability in some way. It's basically a way to limit things to once per turn without saying that they're limited to once per turn.
And then that
That symbol there means to dull. It is always part of action ability costs, and it just means dull the card.
Or special ability costs.
Freeze. If a card is frozen, it does not activate during its controller's next active phase. So it will just stay dull when their next turn starts. To activate is the opposite of dulling. To be active is the opposite of to be dull. Basically, you turn a card from being sideways to being straight face up.
You'll hear a lot of people still just call this tap and untap because Magic stole all the good, easy, common words. And a lot of them I don't think honestly could be copyrighted, but everybody's so scared that they can be.
Not copyrighted, it is,
Could be trademark too.
that's why so many.
And again, like some of them, like tap maybe I could see. Some of the other ones that I've seen people dance around, it's like, that's such a generic word. I don't know that holds up, but that's how we get into this.
Okay, so then we have haste. A character with a forward with haste can attack on the turn it's played, and I guess forwards are the only things with summoning sickness. Okay, so a forward with haste can attack and activate abilities with the dull symbol in them on the turn it's played. Normally you can't. You have to control the character from the beginning of the turn. It does not have to have existed since the beginning of the turn. You have to control it since the beginning of the turn.
So, words. You say forwards with haste can dull
Yes.
abilities. Can forwards without haste use non-dull abilities?
Yes.
When they come in?
Yes. They just can't use, and specifically with that dull symbol. If something says dull active whatever, you can do it even if you just played that card.
Okay.
Yes, they can't attack and they can't use abilities with that dull symbol.
So after that, we have first strike. Forwards with first strike deal their damage first in combat. So if a forward with first strike is blocked by another forward, normally damage is done between those forwards simultaneously. In this case, the forward with first strike deals its damage first, then the other forward deals its damage. This is important because if the first forward breaks the second forward, then the first forward takes no damage because that forward isn't around anymore. But if you get rid of a blocking forward, the attacking forward is still blocked.
Is there a double strike
No.
equivalent?
No. There's things that will double the amount of damage dealt, but no. There's also no trample. I don't even know how they do that in this. If two things have first strike, they deal damage simultaneously again. Brave just means that a forward does not dull when it attacks. So it'll still be open to block on your opponent's turn, or to use a dull ability if you need to use it.
Do blocking cards get dulled?
No,
No, blocking cards do not get dulled.
but they have to be active. Also, you cannot attack forwards. I've had that question come up a couple times from people who play One Piece.
Yeah. So in this one, much like Magic, you are attacking the other player. They can choose to block, they can choose not to block, but you are attacking a player, not their forwards.
Search in this is keyworded, so they don't have to write reveal and shuffle every single time. So search basically just means look through your deck for whatever thing they're telling you to look for, show your card to your opponent, and then shuffle your deck. Sometimes the card goes to your hand, sometimes it goes to the field. But importantly, that means you always show your opponent what you found, even if you are searching for just a card. Back attack. Characters that have back attack can be played at any time you could cast a summon. Interestingly enough, to go back to the stack thing, that means that if you cast it during a stack, then your opponent can't do anything till it enters.
Okay.
Because playing character still doesn't use the stack.
So it's on the stack, but it doesn't use the stack.
No, it just when you could do something with the stack, you can just play this character, and then you go back to doing the stack as normal.
Oh, okay. That's weird.
There's not a lot of cards with back attack. It's not there's some, but and then casting specifically means to pay a card's cost and play it from your hand. That's just something different cards will care about. The number of cards you've cast this turn when you cast a card of this type, or et cetera, et cetera.
So back attack for a hot second.
Yeah.
Can you use one of those cards to put in as a blocker?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. In fact, there are cards that are meant to. There's a card that you're supposed to use that for because it has back attack, and then if it blocks something, the forward's broken at end of combat.
All right, we got anything else in this PowerPoint?
No, that's my last slide.
All right. What are we
So,
looking at?
any other big questions before we move to a sample game? Face up, because you need to see if it's an EX burst.
That's like if it goes into damage, it comes back out. Does that mean you don't take the damage then?
No, you still take the damage even if the card is an EX burst, because the amount of damage you taken is signified by how many cards are in your damage zone. Anything else? Okay, also EX bursts don't use the stack. You can't respond to them. They just happen immediately. Yes, one total of either. You can't-
Per
Per
player.
player.
And that's not a deck building restriction, that's just for in play.
You could strictly speaking have as many light and dark cards as you want. You just won't be playing the game. Anything else? And then we do have a scripted sample game to hopefully elucidate anything you're still confused about.
There are light and dark backups?
Yes, there are light and dark backups. Don't ask me if you can dull those for CP. I want to say no, but I think I have seen people do it. So I think it might be yes.
Let's see if I can get an answer to that real quick.
Yeah, you do that.
So light and dark backups, that still counts towards
Yes.
your one on the field?
Yes, because your field is just one big zone. So that all the card name rule, the light and dark rule, all of that counts, forwards, backups, monsters, everything.
What was it was you're allowed to have 5 backups?
Yes, you are allowed to have 5 backups. If you have 5 backups, you cannot play more backups. You are stuck at 5 until you can somehow get rid of one of them.
And how many like forwards?
Any number of forwards and monsters. Backups are the only thing that's limited.
You mentioned the limit break mechanic was added recently. Is it required?
Required is a strong word. You're at a bit of a disadvantage when you don't also have access to a free 8-card hand. But it's up to 8 cards, so strictly speaking, you could have a 0-card limit break deck.
So real quick, I'm going to go back to the light and dark backups thing. Best information I have from interpretations of the comprehensive rule is that, yes, you can tap them for, it's kind of colorless because they're not going to make the elements that you need, but you can tap them for 1 CP. The main ones say on them, otherwise they say, oh, you can tap this for anything.
Yeah, there's a couple that say they can tap them for anything. There's one that becomes an element of your choice when it enters. So it's not something that comes up a lot. But okay, so are we good to move to the next thing? All right. Hold on while I remember where the mouse is. How do you exit presentation mode?
I mean, my go-to would be escape.
Aha. Just give me a second to find
Which
the mouse.
which one do you want?
I'll take the worst one.
I mean, I know it doesn't really matter that much.
I'll lose. It's fine. I can take it.
We did have to script this one out.
I had to script this. I was up till 3 a.m. scripting this game. And definitely not just because I left it to the last minute and put too much effort into the PowerPoint. Sample game. Because we don't have a webcam or anything, so I made this PowerPoint so you can all follow along.
But we're still going to play it out up here so that we can actually read the cards so that we can convey the full information to you. Because trying to take that up on a PowerPoint is not going to leave a lot of space. I think that's your limit break deck.
No. My limit break deck is in red because that's the sleeves that the main deck's in.
Well, then, I don't know what those ones go to.
The other deck. The fire lightning one.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll put those back later.
Yeah. Don't shuffle.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to get the sleeve out
Cards,
is
the
what I'm
cards
doing.
the cards are stacked. Don't shuffle.
Okay. So, do you want to go ahead and go to the first slide there?
Yep. Okay, so first slide. We're going to start the game. Just 2 players, 2 decks. Having a good time. Okay, so I'm going to go first. I'm playing this Fire Earth 7-themed deck. Final Fantasy 7, that is.
Sorry, is there a limit on deck building with elements?
No. Nope. It's 50 cards. Can't have more than 3 of a specific serial number. Any number of elements. You just got to make sure you can play your cards.
There's a really, really popular archetype right now that's 4 colors. So multicolor
There's a couple
is
different ones because quote unquote mono Earth is actually just whatever you feel like playing at the time. There's Tribal Warrior of Light that's a 4-color deck because there's a 4-color Warrior of Light. So I forgot to get my speaker notes out. It's fine. This first turn is super simple.
Yeah, but I didn't know what I'm doing too.
Yeah, it's fine.
I only read the script once.
It's fine. I think it's pretty obvious actually. Okay, so for my first turn, I'm just going to take it nice and slow. I'm going to discard a red 13 and an Objet d'Art, which is like a little statue enemy from Final Fantasy V. They were good to grind AP on. And I'm going to play this card here up on the screen, which is Miner. Now, Miner has an ability that will activate when he enters the field, where I choose a backup in my break zone and add it to my hand. So since this red 13 that I just discarded for CP is a backup, I can put him into my hand, and now I have that extra card in my hand that I didn't lose to play that card. And that is going to be my first turn.
All right, now do you want to hand your...
And so now the field is going to look like this.
You want to hand your phone over, or do you want to just dictate what I'm doing to me? Might be easier for you to just read it from there.
Yeah, I'll just read it. Okay, so For you, what you're going to do
Hmm.
is you're going to play these two backups. You're going to discard the Shiva in your hand, and that's going to let you play the Scholar.
And Scholar is just a backup that I can't do anything with yet because it enters tapped. I can later tap it and choose a forward to make it lose Haste, First Strike, and Brave.
And then you're going to discard Fujin to play Sid Kramer.
And Sid Kramer says that when I cast Category 8 cards, if he's on the field, he can make CP of any element to play them.
And so now our field is going to look like this. Moving on to my next turn. I'm going to draw my 2 cards. Did you remember to draw your 2 cards?
Yes.
Okay. I had to be sure. Are these the right 2 cards? These aren't the right 2 cards. Hold
Did
on.
you forget to draw the first card?
I did forget to draw the first card. That's what it was. Okay, so I'm going to draw my 2 cards. And then, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to dull my Miner for 1 CP. And then I'm going to discard my Wedge so I can play this Polk. And when Polk enters, he says I can choose a job Avalanche Operative in my break zone to add to my hand. So I'm going to grab that Wedge I just discarded and put him back in my hand so that I can then discard him again to play this Biggs.
Adding cards to your hand is extremely powerful in this game.
And there's a lot of ways to do it.
Everything is a resource.
So Biggs, normally he costs 3, but he costs 2 less if I control a job Avalanche Operative, which Polk is. So I can discard Wedge, and that will generate 2 CP. But in any event, in any situation, you can overpay by 1 CP when you discard cards. That's all you're allowed to overpay. But I can't really think of a reason why you would overpay by more, unless you're doing some shenanigans with backups. But, so basically I discard Wedge to get 2 CP, and then I'm only paying the 1 for Biggs. Question?
CP linger.
No. Nope. Once you've played the card or activated the ability, CP's gone.
So, does that mean did you say you can only overpay by 1?
Yes.
Okay, so you're not allowed to pay with something pretty more
Yeah.
expensive.
Right, so like
I'm
if
not
you're-
allowed to like dump my whole hand in my break zone to have it there to play 1 card.
I see. Okay.
But now that I've got Biggs on the
That's a
field,
much quicker way to explain it than I was about to.
after double killing Wedge to play 2 cards, my field is now going to look like this. And then we will move on to question.
Is there a hand limit?
5. There's if at the end of your turn, if you have more than 5 cards in hand, you have to discard down to 5 cards. It doesn't come up a lot because you're constantly discarding cards to play cards, so I always forget about it. But that is the case. Yes, thank you for saying that. Okay, so now it's going to be your
Looks like
turn.
I'm going to have a turn.
Yeah, draw 2 cards. You played this deck. You know it has turns.
This deck does, in fact, have turns.
Okay, so
All
you're
right,
going to
backups are activated, cards are drawn.
yes, so you're going to dull your Scholar, and you're going to discard Jack to play Laguna.
And then Laguna says, when he enters the field, I may search for 1 card named Squall and add it to my hand.
And he should be on the bottom there.
He sure is.
So he's going to grab a Squall.
I will reveal to you that it is Squall.
Yep. Normally you'd shuffle his deck now, but we're not going to do that because these are in a specific order. So next, you're going to discard the Aldo in your hand to play Jack. So when Jack enters, he's going to put the top 3 cards of his deck into his break zone. And one of the cards he put in was Raijin. And Raijin says that if he's put from your deck into your break zone, you immediately play him onto the field. And then when he enters, you're going to put the top 2 cards of your deck in your break zone again, but they're unimportant. And that should be the end of your turn.
Yes, because Raijin does have a further ability once I have 10 cards in my break zone, but I do not yet.
And so now things are looking pretty dicey for me. Question.
Sorry, I'm just losing track of the CP numbers. So
Okay.
Dulling gives you 1 of any.
Dulling gives you 1, discarding gives you 2.
Discard. Okay, it's just flat. So
Yes.
Yes, it is always just 1 and 2.
Yes.
And it's 1 of any color. Or like you choose one of the.
You choose one of the colors on the card, yes. Okay, so for my turn, I'm going to draw 2 cards. So I'm going to dull Polk to generate 1 CP to let me cast Jesse, who's only 1 because I control an Avalanche Operative forward. Then I'm going to dull my minor and discard that red 13 I added back to my hand in the first turn, so I can play Barrett. Now, Barrett, when he enters, is going to deal 3,000 damage for each Category 7 forward I control to one chosen forward. And so I'm going to choose to deal that damage to Jack, who has the highest power on my opponent's board right now. Then, because a fire forward entered my... Question?
Question about party attack.
Yes.
Can you party attack with the forward that just entered?
No, they both have to be legal attackers.
Okay.
You're just attacking with both of them at the same time as one forward.
Okay.
So there are certain cards that can reactivate other cards.
Yes.
You said that forwards if, sorry, they kind of tangent off that too.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I'm sure other people are wondering too.
Can you attack effectively if it gets reactivated?
No.
at the same time?
Each forward attacks only once each turn. So now, since a fire forward entered my field, this Ifrit in my hand has its cost reduced by 3 if a fire forward has entered my field this turn. And so I'm going to cast that to deal 7,000 damage to Raijin.
Do you not put cards into the damage zone when that happens? That only when you're attacking?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's make sure we've got a couple terms clarified here. When cards are going from the field, they're going to your break zone. Magic players, you would know this is the graveyard. The damage zone is a separate zone that's only happening when you're being dealt combat damage by a forward.
Speaking of which, my next action is going to be to attack with Biggs to deal 1 damage to my opponent.
So then, I'm not blocking.
Yeah, you
right?
choose not to
Okay.
block.
So then I flip the top card of my deck into the damage zone. Now I have 1 card in the damage zone, as shown here.
And it looks like this. And now, once one of us has 7 cards in our damage zone, they lose the game. So, now what you're going to do, you draw your cards.
Yes.
You're going to dull both of your backups to produce 2 CP.
Mhm.
And you're going to discard your second copy of Laguna. And that will let you play Squall. Squall is kind of the centerpiece of this deck. He gets bonuses for having a bunch of Category 8 characters on the board. And also, at the beginning of the attack phase, during each of his turns, he can play a Category 8 forward for free, as long as its cost is 4 or less. So, you'll move to your combat phase. Squall will trigger, and you will play Quistis from your hand for free. And now what Quistis does is he's going to choose the same number of characters as the number of Category 8 forwards he controls. He's going to dull them, and since he controls 3 or more Category 8 forwards, he's going to freeze them. Question?
I have an additional question about the damage zone.
Yes.
My understanding was you turn it up so you can see its
Yes.
It stays face up in that damage zone. Yeah. Now, in our case, and I should have said this.
The board was flipped
The board state slideshow showed it, I think.
or am I
Okay.
Right there.
Hold
Okay.
on. Hold on. You're gonna point. I'm gonna point.
This is the damage zone.
I see, okay.
So yeah.
one of those in play here, and in the damage zone here.
Okay, I see.
So what we have, the face down pile is the deck. The pile next to the deck is the break zone. The damage zone goes on the opposite side of the field so that they don't get mixed up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So we were back to Quistis is dulling and freezing all of your forwards.
Yes, that did happen. So now all my forwards are dulled and frozen.
And then Squall cannot attack you, but I have to presume this Laguna is about to attack you.
Yep, you're going to attack with Laguna, and I'm going to put this min move from Brave Exvius into my damage zone. And so now the board is going to look like this. I've turned all of the frozen characters once again, because that way when you're doing your active phase, you're still turning everything. You don't have to remember to not turn things, but you just turn them 1/4 turn. It's
And that's
just
not an official thing like it was in the early days of Pokemon. That's just a nice little thing that we do for...
Yeah, that's just a thing I've seen people
Housekeeping.
do, so I started doing it myself. So next is going to be my turn. I'm going to draw 2 cards. And then I'm only going to be able to play 1 card this turn because I only have so many in my hand. And so I'm just going to dull my 2 backups to produce 2 CP, discard another fire card for 2 more, and I'm going to play the Zac. Zac says that when he or a fire forward enters, I choose a forward and deal it 2,000 damage, and then when he or a category 7 forward enters, I choose a forward, deal it 2,000 damage. So I'm going to use both of those abilities to deal 4,000 damage to my opponent's Laguna, which is going to put it into the break zone, so I don't have to worry about it. And so now I have an extra forward, he has 1 less. Then your next turn.
All right.
So you're going to draw your 2 cards.
Activate, draw 2.
So you're going to dull your Scholar, and you're going to discard those 2 cards you just drew.
All right. Stelling Scholar for 1, discarding Odin for 2, and Amo for 2, so
And
I
that's
have
gonna
5 CP.
And that's going to let you play Edia. And so when Edia enters, he can search his deck for a category 8 forward and add it to his hand. So you're going to grab a Cypher. Then you're going to move to combat and use Squall's ability to play that
Play
Cypher,
the Cypher for free.
Now, when Cypher enters, he's going to put the top 2 cards of his deck into his break zone.
One of which is Fujin.
And Fujin, much like Raijin, when it's put from your deck into your break zone, immediately goes to the field.
And then makes me mill 2 more cards.
Yes. Inconsequential cards. Okay, so now that you're in your combat, you're going to attack with Squall. And now, before I have the chance to declare blockers, you're going to activate Edia's ability,
What was her
which
ability
says
again?
to put the top 2 cards of your deck into your break zone, and then you're going to choose a forward, and it's going to lose 8,000 power. And having chosen Zac, my Zac
lose
is now
8,000
gone,
power
and I have no blockers.
and go to the break zone.
But, after taking that first damage, you'll attack with Quistis. And I will hit this EX Burst of Q-Sith, who will let me put a forward or backup from my break zone back into my hand. And so I'm going to grab this red 13 in my break zone and put it back in my hand. And that is the end of that turn.
Yep, nothing else has haste. I'm out of cards in hand. Nothing in a limit break deck costs 1.
Nope. No, we're not going to do that till the end. Okay, so now on my turn, I need to do something about this board. So, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to activate Barrett's special ability, which says that I'm going to discard another card named Barrett and dull him, but he won't activate during my next active phase, but I'm going to deal 10,000 damage to a forward. And so I'm going to deal 10,000 damage to Edia.
Edia is dead.
So then I'm going to move to my combat phase, and I'm going to attack with Jesse and Biggs as a party. Both of them are going to trigger at the same time. Because I control both effects, I get to choose which order they're going to happen in. So first I'm going to choose to do Biggs' effect. If I go back to a slide where Biggs was, so you can see what he does. And so what Biggs is going to let me do is I'm going to draw a card, and also the forwards in his party do not take any damage. Then Jesse is going to trigger. And I'm going to be able to play this cloud from my hand onto the field for free. So what that's going to do now is I'm going to choose to have him deal 10,000 damage to Fujin. And I will also have him give himself haste. When he enters, if I control a job avalanche operative, I could choose 2 of the 3 following options. I'm going to choose to deal 10,000 damage to a forward and to give him haste. Then, and then I ordered this a little bit wrong. Before Cloud's ability resolves, I have drawn a second copy of this Ifrit that I can cast for free if I have a fire forward enter my field this turn. And that is going to deal 7,000 damage to Cypher. So now my opponent's field is bereft of blockers. Took a lot of cards to get there, but we got there.
So, now we go to the damage from the party. Even though it's 2 creatures, it's still just 1 party.
Forwards.
Thank you, forwards.
But
But
unfortunately, my opponent has hit an EX Burst. And this Odin, when he EX bursts, just choose a forward, break it. So
Cloud is gone.
Cloud is gone. So I can't get another attack in this turn. And so now the field looks a little more balanced, but I'm also still behind. So for your next turn, draw your cards. You're going to dull both your backups. And you're
So
gonna
this looks like a pretty obvious turn.
you're going to discard IMO to play Alcid.
Yep, so discarding IMO for 2 CP, tapping each backup for 1, and playing Alcid from 12.
And then we're going to pretend he doesn't trigger himself, because I forgot about that. And then you're going to move to combat. And you're going to play the Renoa in your hand for free off of Squall's ability.
I think you missed a card draw for me at some point, because I do not have a Renoa in hand.
How do you not have a Renoa in hand?
Did you miss a mill?
Maybe.
Yeah, you must have missed a mill.
Okay, put a Renoa in your hand. We'll pretend this didn't happen. So then Alcid will trigger, because an ice forward enters his field, he's going to freeze Biggs. And Barrett is already essentially frozen from his own ability. So then you'll move to combat, and you will attack with Squall, and then attack with Questus. So first, I'm going to get this Marlene into my damage zone, which is going to let me put the Cloud that was just destroyed back into my hand.
And this is also why it matters for the for the order on the one creature at a time, because those EX bursts will happen in between this creature attacking.
And then I will also lose
forward.
another card
Wrong game.
into damage. And so now I am at 5 damage, and my opponent is at 2. And my opponent has 4 forwards, while I have 3, 2 of which I won't be able to do anything with on my next turn. But it is my turn now. Okay, so I'm going to duel my 2 backups, and I'm going to discard a fire card and an earth card to let me just play Cloud normally, because I'm not going to be able to play him for free this turn, and I really need to play him. So then I'm going to have him deal 10,000 damage to Squall, so that he stops getting free cards every turn. And then I'm going to activate the ability of Clouds I didn't last time, which is to play an Avalanche Operative from my break zone onto the field. Now, I already have a Biggs and a Jesse, so I'm going to have to play Wedge. And then from there, I'm not really comfortable attacking because I only have a 7,000 power forward while he has 2 8,000 power blockers. So I'm just going to pass my turn there. Now, luckily, he's not going to draw too well this turn. But when Renoa entered, put Cypher back in your hand.
Okay. So I feel like we missed something.
Yeah, I
there.
missed the Renoa trigger. He got the Renoa when it enters. He gets a Category 8 card from his break zone back to his hand. So he put this Cypher in there, and now he's going to cast that Cypher.
I'm assuming by tapping Scholar and
No,
discarding all that?
Sid Kramer into sale.
Okay.
Literally the opposite of what you thought it was.
Cool. Gotcha. So the Cypher comes back.
And then you're going to mill 2 cards. And it's Jack and another Cypher. So no more disciplinary committee members for you. So then you'll attack with Renoa. And my second Polk will go into my damage. I'm at 6 damage. I'm just about to lose. And then you will attack with
We'll swing with
Alcid.
Alcid.
And we'll say that you don't wedge. But I'm going to block with Jesse so that I don't lose the game now. And Jesse will go to the break zone from having taken too much damage.
And then I believe I'm passing the turn here.
Yep. On to the penultimate turn of the game. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, and then this is what the field looks like. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to discard the Zac I just drew to play this Tifa I just drew. She has haste. Then I'm going to party attack with Biggs and Wedge. Biggs will trigger, and I will draw a card, as I did before. And Wedge will trigger, and will break Renoa, who is a 4-cost character who is dull. Or a 4-cost forward that is dull. Then I will.
Am I taking the damage there?
Yes.
Okay.
Then I
added to
will.
the damage zone.
Then I will attack with Cloud. Before he can declare blockers, I drew my third copy of that Ifrit because I really needed it, and I'm going to deal 7,000 damage to Cypher so he can't block me. So then you will take another damage. That's your other copy of Al Cid. And then I will attack with Tifa. No, I attack with Barrett.
That makes sense.
And another card is put into damage. But I don't feel quite safe because Al Cid doles a forward when he attacks. So I'm going to spend the rest of the cards in my hand and one backup to finally go into my Limit Break deck and play Celteus here, who will function basically just as a nice blocker. And so things are looking a little more even at the end of this turn. But we move on to the final turn of the game, where my opponent also remembers he has a Limit Break deck. And so basically you're going to pick a way to play Sergis out of your Limit Break deck.
Yep. Let me just grab Sergis here. Actually put the right card on the field so I can read it. So we're going to play Sergis there. Just discard a card for it.
And when Sergis enters, he chooses a forward, and he will either dull it or freeze it. So he'll choose to dull my Celteus.
So now his only blocker has 5,000 power. I only have to get one forward through.
And you attack with El Cid, who, when a lightning forward you control attacks, you dull a forward your opponent controls. And so now I have no blockers, and I take my 7th point of damage, and I lose. And so that's basically a game. That's basically how the game goes.
Is there a rule like Magic where you can't draw a card?
Yes.
Yes, there is.
Can you build a mill deck?
No.
Damn it.
Well,
Not a good one, anyway.
we're trying. You want to look at Thieves, and it's going to be Wind something.
There's some okay mill cards. They had to ban a Riku because they were worried she was going to be too good at mill.
And
Because here's the thing. A 50-card deck, you draw 2 cards a turn, and damage is done by taking cards from the top of your deck. You don't have to mill someone as much to make them lose.
And it's going to sound funny to hear this, because wasn't she just tap mill a card?
She might have even been pay wind tap if your opponent mills a card.
But there's so many ways for Wind to untap backups that you'd be able to go like, oh no, here's just 8 cards gone.
Let me just tap a backup and tap Riku, you mill a card, then I'm going to tap a third backup, cast the summon that activates all my backups to then do it again.
Now,
And that's what wind is.
this didn't come up, but since we're getting towards the end of the panel, I want to bring this up too, because a lot of hands went up when we said, have you played Magic? So a lot of people in this room know what it costs to build a Magic deck. This game is not that expensive to get into.
This game is actually, frankly, very cheap.
You can build, what was that, 2023's Worlds decks?
Yeah.
So at the big tournaments, you play 2 decks that can't share any cards. And you do a best 2 out of 3. You've got to win with 2 of your decks.
Lots of Worlds decks are under $200.
You could build the winning ones for about the same cost as competitive Modern Burn. It was 2 decks for about $250 versus Burn I was showing at the time about $300. And that was a particularly expensive deck for Final Fantasy II. It's really easy. If you're not going to the big tournaments, you can probably slap something together for $20-$30. If you are going to the big tournaments, $70 to $150, depending on what archetype, if you really want the fancy treatments. We are running a little bit over here, so if you guys have more questions, one and or both of us will be set up over in Tabletop Free Play for the next few hours with that whole box full of learner-friendly decks for everybody to kind of get their hands on some different play styles. If you got any more questions, just let us know.